good evening. Welcome to the Tunnel Podcast, episode 52 of the greatest podcast in the world. Delighted to say we are back. Domestic football is back. And I'm back with Tom Goff, as always. Tom, how are we doing?
Yeah, good. Thanks, bud. Yeah, looking forward to the domestic stuff kicking off again this weekend. It is well and truly the final countdown now, isn't it? The last leg. So
business end.
Business end.
It's one away. That's it. Listen,
that's it, mate. So this is what it's all about, isn't it?
Oh yeah, listen. This is where winners and losers, they'll be decided within the next kind of 8 games. Look, just want to start off with some housekeeping, some kind of sad news about today. Eddie Boothroyd, you remember at Watford and Coventry, and more recently as England under-21 manager. He's come out and told us for the last kind of 3 years he's been dealing with a Parkinson's diagnosis. So we do wish him well and his family, and he'll be in our thoughts certainly as the pod goes on. I'm sure you'll echo that as well, Tom.
Yeah, it's obviously sad to hear. As you know, I've got an uncle who suffers with Parkinson's. So yeah, horrible disease, mate. What it does to you. So yeah, like you said, wish him all the best. And yeah, I think he was saying, wasn't he? He's still keen to get stuck in and keep the coaching going. Whilst he's still relatively quite fit and healthy. So yeah, good luck to him.
I didn't realise. I'm looking right. Most recently, he was in the Indian Premier League. So who knows? We may see him back. Hopefully, we do. Look, tonight's podcast has got a bit more of an opinionated feel to start with. Tom is sitting on eggshells, tenterhooks. So listen, as I say, couple of stories that broke in the week that I do want to attack and have a bit of fun with. Then we'll look at the playoff push, what's going to happen there. And then, obviously, as always, as we do on a Thursday, we'll talk about the weekend's games as well. So, yes, Tom, a story that broke today. Your very own Jason Malumbi come out and said that he feels that there's a real lack of atmosphere at the Hawthorns this season and feels that it may be kind of impacting on performances.
Yeah, to be fair, it was something that that broke. I think it was about a couple of weeks ago, but yeah, it seemed to have kind of snuck under the radar, but then yeah, it's been picked up on this week and yeah, put out there, and yeah, it's like I was saying to you earlier when we were having a chat, it seems to have split the fan base in that there's a large proportion of the Albion fans are kind of in agreement with him in that over the last few seasons, probably even longer than that, the atmosphere at the Hawthorns has begun to dwindle somewhat, and it's not what it once was. And like he was saying, he basically was saying that he thinks it's having a negative impact, but then there's the other side of the fence, again, another large portion of the fan base kind of in disagreement with him. First and foremost, they think he shouldn't really be coming out and saying what he said. Maybe the manner in which he said it. Sorry, but that it's not just at the Hawthorns. It's something that's becoming more widespread amongst football. For whatever reason, the atmosphere within stadiums isn't what it once was. So, yeah, it's quite an interesting one. And again, I'm not just sitting on the fence with it, but I do think there is some truth in what he's saying. But then I kind of disagree with with it to an extent as well. So, yeah, it's an interesting one. I don't know. Like I said,
let's get his comments out in the open. So, he said it was great to hear, the Cranberries being played a couple of times at full time, which is great. We obviously know that's his song. He went on to say things have gone flat, which is a shame, because when the atmosphere is loud and rocking, like it was against QPR when we were down to 10 men, we could feel how behind us they were, and it does really help massively. Frustrated groans and nervousness can affect us on the pitch. When noises around the ground are loud and positive, the Hawthorns are as tough place as any in the league to come. So we obviously need the home fans on our side for the remainder of the season to see where we end up. Look, you have been to games this season. I've been here with you. It has been noticeable in comparison to previous experiences. I'd not been there for probably 10 plus years. You'd not been maybe for a season or two. What do you put it down to? Let's deal with West Brom and the comments he's made first, and we'll come on to football wider in a moment. But what do you put it down to your club? Is there something you can put it on to, or is it a culmination of things?
I think it's difficult to just pin it down on one thing. Look, I think a big one is that I think football is just becoming more and more inclusive. I think, this is just my experiences at the Hawthorns. I think they are, it's more family friendly, so to speak. I remember when, I first started going along to football games as a young kid alongside my dad, and there definitely wasn't as many kids about then, I don't feel, and again, I wouldn't say it was very kind of family orientated, at that moment in time. Whereas now, I do feel that if anything, clubs are almost pushing it to be family orientated. They're encouraging families to come along, parents to come along with their kids, and like I said, really pushing the inclusiveness, to come and support your football club. So I definitely feel, and this is the thing. I've got no problem with that. I think football should be, readily available for anyone to come and support their club and to feel comfortable. But then I think the flip side of that is that I think because of that inclusiveness and more kids, more families coming along to games. Again, I don't know what it's like in other stadiums, but I do know for a fact in the Hawthorns that, stewards, security, etc., within the ground have got, a bit more stricter in terms of rowdiness, shall we say. They're quite quick to kind of stamp out any kind of, like I said, rowdiness, misbehaving. Look, sometimes it's warranted, people have to be kind of put in place. But there has been occasions where, I've experienced it where people have been reined in, so to speak, and it's felt a bit harsh. They're ultimately, all they're doing is just, getting excited, supporting, the club they love. So, I think maybe that has a bit to say as well. Another thing as well is again, I don't think this necessarily relates to West Brom, but maybe, when we discuss kind of more widespread, but, ticket prices, I think West Brom are one of the best, in the country in terms of offering, really good value for money. So, I don't think it's a case that certain pockets of people are getting priced out of going along to games. The common man, so to speak, the working class man getting priced out of coming to matches. I don't think that's the case at West Brom, but that I think that could be said maybe other places, especially some teams in the top flight, with how expensive their tickets are, etc. So, look, I think it's a lot of things, mate. I honestly do. I don't know. I don't know what
you were saying there, obviously, about pardon me, families and making that inclusive, and I do get that wholeheartedly. I think it's great. Obviously, you need to get the next generation of fan through the door. But at the Hawthorns, the last time we went there was a pocket in the East Corner who were certainly wanting to be a bit more vociferous in their support. Maybe they'd had a couple of beers before the game, like we all do, and they then ended up getting escorted out of the game. So is it a case that maybe these fans need to be catered for and maybe put into their own kind of section? Does this lead into, like, I don't see a lot of it in the Championship, and I don't know if it's a thing, but fans groups, almost like ultras, as it were. I know Rangers and Celtic both have their ultra groups, and they bring kind of flags and colour and song to the occasion. Is that a thing in the English Championship? You'll have to maybe educate me on that one.
I don't know. I think there's the one that always kind of springs to my mind in English football is Crystal Palace, in that they have a little pocket, don't they, for their like you said, their ultras, so to speak, where they seem to allow the flags to be brought in. And, I'm not sure whether it is a designated safe standing area, but, the fans stand up, don't they? It's a given that the fans stand up there. There's no sitting down. And like you said, they're assigned their little area. So, a fan who wants that experience, they can at least try and get a ticket in that area. And that's great. I think that's honestly the way, the way to move forward with it. And I think, to be fair to the club, I think this is what they are trying to achieve with the safe standing that they're looking to implement, at the end of the season, in the summer before next season starts. I'm hoping that, I just think, those kind of fans will ultimately gravitate towards those areas. And I think where they've chosen those areas, it makes sense in that they seem to be either side of the away fans, which is, like you said, where those fans who want that experience, want a bit of back and forth with the away fans who, away fans always tend to stand up themselves as well, don't they? That banter, that 100%, I think that's the way it needs to be done. I think clubs should have their designated sections, their stands, which are, predominantly family stands and OAPs, etc. And then they should have their stands where, like you said, it's I don't know what you label it. Like you said, ultras, the more hardcore fans. I don't know what you want to call it.
Embrace football culture from the continent, yeah?
Yeah, 100%. They should have their areas as well to be able to support their club in the way that they want to support it. So, yeah, I think you're absolutely spot on. And I don't want to upset you, but, when I watch, I've seen Celtic playing, I always think of that little corner that Celtic have, with all the fans standing up, the standing bit with all the flags, etc. and so on. So, I think...
Does it mean that clubs now have to then be in more dialect with fans? I know clubs do these fans forums, once a season, but does there need to be kind of more to that, more of that, and more regular chats between fans and club so that they're both not disengaged from each other?
Yeah, 100%, mate. And look, again, I can only speak of my experience with West Brom, but I think that's something that the new owners, since they come in, have been absolutely brilliant at doing. They themselves have been attending where possible some of these forums, listening to the fan groups, what they have to say, their ideas and so on. And look, I don't know 100%, but I wouldn't, I think it's probably highly likely that the discussions for these safe standing areas probably stemmed from one of those fan forums, because I know, obviously I have my West Brom page and I know other pages. It's something that we've been discussing amongst ourselves as a fan base for a while now to have, like you said, some designated area, some safe standing, maybe, a little pocket at the very least where, fans can stand up and enjoy the game in that way. So, I'm really excited to see, obviously, it implemented and then see how it pans out. And I'm very confident that it will have, a positive experience, to the atmosphere as a whole, because, like I've said to you, the more hardcore fans, so to speak, tend to, try and get tickets in the Smethwick, which is alongside the away fans. But again, I know from speaking to people here that, especially the people that sit closer to the pitch, towards the front of the stand, they're told to sit down. You're not allowed to stand up. They're told to sit down. They get pressure applied to them to sit in their seats, and that it frustrates me because it almost gives the what's the word, the trump card to the away fans, because most clubs have got really good away followings, like I said, who stand up. They never seem to be encouraged to sit down yet. Our more hardcore fans that are directly opposite them, who are the ones that drum up all the noise, are told to sit down and kind of rein it in, etc. So yeah, I'm intrigued. I'm intrigued to see how it plays out, and yeah, it'll be interesting to see, you know, if more clubs, you know, kind of, you know, jump on the bandwagon, so to speak, and look into applying it as well. Because, like you said, you know, I can't think of, you know, off the top of my head, I can't name you even 3 teams that, you know, do something similar. I know clubs have got their cop ends who, you know, tend to make, you know, generate a lot of noise, you know, but in terms of, like I said, designated little areas for fans to go, stand up, wave the fans, like you said, apply that kind of fan culture you get from the European teams. The only one that comes to my mind is like I said, Crystal Palace.
Something you said earlier on, I wanted to pick up on, was you said you kind of lean towards maybe football evolving and the football changing, and it, you know, it led me to think, you know, have we just become, football's too easily accessible? There's too much of it. We get it on TV every night of the week. At the weekend, there's 5-6 games we can choose from on a Friday, Saturday, Sunday. Whereas maybe 20 years ago, 30 years ago, when you and I were growing up, the only way to go experience football was to go to football. You maybe got 1 or 2 games a week. Is that taken away from it? Has football become, what's that word? I don't know what the word is. It's just become, as I say, too easy to access. It's not become a exclusive anymore.
Mate, I think, again, that's an absolutely cracking point. And I was having a conversation with a good mate of mine, again, a lad who runs an Albion page. He's a season ticket holder, and we were discussing what we're talking about now. And he was saying exactly what you were saying, in that fans, like you said, you go back X amount of years where football wasn't as accessible. You were excited to go and see your team play because, you know, you'd not seen any football whatsoever in the week. You were then going to see your team play. And, you know, I think there was almost an attitude then that performance, in terms of what you were experiencing, you know, what was being played out on the pitch in terms of excitement and performance, wasn't too much of a factor, because, like you said, you were just excited to go and see a game of football for the first time that week, you know, and then after that, you know, you're having to wait another week. Whereas I think you're right now, there's so much football, you know, not just live matches, but accessible to us, obviously, through, you know, social media and you know, YouTube, whatever, that I think fans now are more going along to football games, and they want, you know, they want to be entertained more, in that they are solely, you know, their focus is on the football being played. So, you know, the football and how that plays out on the pitch has a massive say in terms of the excitement level within the ground, if you know what I mean. Yeah, the team has to be.
I agree with you. I feel that the roles reverse. When I used to go as a young lad, I felt like the fans spurred the team on, and now the fans want them to be spurred on by the team, if that makes sense.
Yeah, 100%. And I think this is very much what it is like at the Hawthorns, in that, you know, when we're playing well and the tempo's high, and you know, the fans will get behind them. But, you know, we have a lot of teams that come to the Hawthorns and sit back. They try to frustrate us. You know, they put, you know, 11 men behind the ball, and we'll have spells where, you know, it's sideways passes and passes backwards, where, you know, we're struggling to break teams down. And, you know, and the atmosphere will understand that it will dip. You know, it's hard to, you know, try and get excited and generate noise when, you know, the football on show is a bit drab and a bit boring. So, yeah, I think, you know, that's a really valid point. And, like, you know, what you started off with, Malumbi, you know, the reason, you know, that QPR game that he referenced, well, we were down to 10 men, and the fans were getting behind the players because we were kind of defending for our lives. We were putting our bodies on the line. There was some crunching tackles going in. So whilst it wasn't necessarily entertainment, excitement at the, you know, at their goal, there was something for them to jump onto and get behind them. You know, that defensive effort and the work they were doing defensively. So, yeah, I think you're absolutely spot on with that as well. And I think, you know, again, like, that applies across the board with football. I feel, you know, is that, you know, it's you know, it's always been obviously entertainment. You know, but I do feel now that more fans go along with the expectation of entertainment, and if that's not provided to them, then they will show their what's the word? They'll frustrations and their annoyance, etc. So yeah, I think that's spot on, mate.
Just final word on this then, and to flip it back to Malumbi in his comments. Just your gut instinct as you sit here tonight, 8:30 on the Thursday before the game at the weekend. Do you think it will galvanise the support, or do you think it'll go the other way?
Mate, that's a good question. To be fair, I think there'll be more fans out there who will want to, kind of, either prove him wrong and show that the Hawthorns can be, it can be a cauldron of noise at times. It can be, I've experienced it. I've been going for, years and years and years. So yeah, I think it will do more good than bad what he's come out and said. But like I said at the start, I do think it has annoyed quite a lot of the fan base as well, because I think, look, he's entitled to his opinion, and I don't begrudge him that whatsoever. But like we've just been discussing for the last 20 minutes, there's lots of different factors involved, isn't there? And it's not as simple as just saying, the Hawthorns has been a bit naff for the last kind of, half a dozen home games. Ultimately implying that that shouldn't be the case, that they should be getting behind us, from the get-go till the final whistle. That's a little bit naive from him, I think. So I can understand why some people have maybe got a bit miffed by the comments as well.
My message to anyone that leaves early or feels they have to go and get a bus, a train, or just for the last maybe how many 4 home games left is there? Just stay to the end for the last 4 home games and see what impact you can have on the pitch, and also what impact it has on your life. Maybe you do go home later to watch Gladiators on iPlayer, or get your curry a little bit later, whatever it may be. But just see what impact it has to the club and to the atmosphere. That would be my message. Mate,
that again, I'll just jump on that. That's a big issue. That is another big issue. Again, I could talk another 10 minutes about it, but there's serious issues with the infrastructure outside the ground. And like you said, a lot of fans feel that they have to leave a bit early if they want to get away, within a reasonable time frame. But then, like you said, I think it's been like that for some time now. So I just feel like, if you're an Albion fan, I think you have to accept that there's going to be traffic after the game. You're not going to get away very quickly. You're going to, even if you leave 5-10 minutes before, and you're still most likely going to get stuck in traffic. So, why do you keep buying your season ticket when the situation outside the ground afterwards? Like you said, we're needed. The team needs us to stick there as very close to the end as possible, because that has been one thing. And there's been quite a few games this season where we've kind of let goals slip in the last 10 minutes. Well, the stadium, becoming half empty with 10 minutes to go. There's no way that's having a positive impact on the players, is it? And there's no way they're not picking that up from the pitch. People leaving in their droves. So it's like I said, mate. Lots of
as well. Let's just say 4,000 or 5,000 leave on 70 minutes, right? And you go on to having been winning 1-0 to draw 1 each. Let's just say, for talking sake, okay. I don't think the fans will be that bothered that they've left early and they'll just blame the team. But then you look at the other week when Malumbi scores that late goal and there's so much emotion, and they're going to be at home thinking, damn, we left early, we missed that. And just that one moment, see if you can get one of them a season. They're moments that last a lifetime, more than beating the traffic. That's what I can't grasp.
Well, that's it, mate. Yeah, nothing beats a last minute winner, does it? Nothing beats it. Injury time winner.
Just at the thought of it, I love it.
It's like you said, it's just pure emotion. It's up there with the greatest feelings in football. So yeah, I'm with you, mate, 100%. Look, I have left games early, but I only tend to leave games early when we're absolutely done and dusted. We're 3-0 down or something, and there's no sign of any comeback, etc. Like you said, I think if there's still something to play for, even if it's we're 1 down and there's a chance of getting an equaliser and a point, you got to stick with them, haven't you? And stick with them to the very end to try and get them something. So,
100%. Okay, we'll swiftly move on. Another kind of story again involving West Brom that kind of broke during the international break is this ticketing fiasco at Coventry. Obviously, West Brom fans not really impressed that Coventry are charging £37 for an adult and £25 for a child. Now, you've said earlier on there, and I've experienced this myself, West Brom are really fairly priced. £30 for adults, £20 for under 25s, and kids are pennies as well, aren't they? What was it you said? A kid's season ticket, was it, Albion?
Well, so under 14s, West Brom, and they're rolling it out again next season. It's £1 a game, so they get a season ticket for 23 quid. So stunning. If you're under, so if you're under 14, so I was having a look beforehand. Under 14, your season ticket's £23. And then under 17, it's £69 for a season ticket, 125 quid for under 20, and 219 quid for a young adult 20 to 25. So yeah, it's good going, isn't it?
It's cracking, absolutely stunning. But okay, so where do you sit then? Taking your kind of West Brom hat off for a minute on clubs pricing ticket, an adult ticket at 37 quid. I mean, I just went to the Steel City Derby the other week. The guts of 50 quid. I think it was £46 with the booking fee. It went up to maybe 47, 48 quid, which I thought was going somewhere. I've been to European semi-finals and paid less. Let's just put it that way. Now, is there I read a comment on a tweet, and it said from a Coventry fan, and he kind of said, "Well, how do you expect us to get to the Premier League if we don't start charging Premier League prices?" Is that a philosophy you buy into? No, I can see you shaking your head right away.
No, not at all. It's a massive issue, I think, in English football, and you've just got to look to the continent. For me, like you've just said, the price comparison for the top leagues in Europe, Germany, Italy, even Spain, the prices that they offer to go and see football in their top flight in comparison to our own, the difference is just absolutely astronomical. Like you said, I've seen these, you see plenty of them now on social media where it'll be, some Plymouth fan, outlining how much it's cost him to go and watch Plymouth away versus Watford, with all the travel, the cost of the ticket, all the food, etc. And then they've then gone and watched AC Milan, the following week, got a cheap Ryanair flight, and it's, with the ticket and the food and everything, it's cost less. Well, just that in itself, just, you don't even need to know, all the financial blooming, shenanigans going on behind the scenes. That in itself just tells me that something is wrong with how we are doing things in this country. It should not cost you more to travel to any game away in the Championship, with your ticket and your food and all the rest of it, your bits and bobs. It should not cost less for you to get a bloody flight to Italy and go see AC Milan versus blooming, Napoli, and come back home, and that's cost you less. That's just absolutely bonkers in itself, I think. So, yeah, I something needs to happen, in my opinion. I'm a firm believer in that away fan tickets should be capped. I honestly feel that, it costs so much to go and follow your team away from home with all the added extras, your travel, if it is a proper jaunt, you're most likely going to go and stay bed and breakfast or something, the night before, all your food and so on, to then be expected to pay close to 50 quid for the ticket as well in some places. And this is the Championship we're talking about. Just disgusting, in my opinion. Like I said, I just feel that away tickets should just be capped 30 quid, something like that. Across the board, it costs you 30 quid to go and see to go and get a ticket to watch your team and, in any game in the Championship. The clubs themselves, again, I don't think it's right. I feel like there's a lot of clubs out there, Coventry being one of them, charging way too much to their own fans to go and follow him. But that's their business then, isn't it? That's them deciding on how they want to treat their fans, what they want to do for their fans. But I feel with away fans, I feel that something really does need to be done to try and help out with, the extortionate costs to go and follow your team away from home.
So you think the EFL should get involved and bring something in, yeah?
Yeah, 100%. I know they've done such similar things in Germany. I don't know whether I don't know what the situation as it stands now, but I remember reading something a few seasons back where they had a cap. They had a cap on tickets. It might have been away tickets, but they put some sort of cap on tickets. So it wasn't going to price people out of going and following their team. And look, I know for a fact that the likes of Bayern Munich and Borussia Dortmund, etc. I know they're like €20 a ticket. They're absolutely dirt cheap. Same for clubs in Italy as well. What is the reason as to why we charge fans in this country so much more than teams do on the continent?
I give you a simple answer. Because we pay it. We pay it.
Well, yeah, I know.
That's the trouble, because not enough. The only way to vote in football is to vote with your feet. Clubs will take notice if the ground's empty and they're not making money. But trouble is, if you don't pay the 37 quid, if I don't pay the 46 quid that the Steel City Derby the other week, someone else's bum's in that seat. Someone will pay it. And I think that's where we're at with it. It's very difficult to rein it back in. And to go further with this now, I don't know if you saw the stuff. I know we talk about the Championship. I think it's pertinent in terms of this conversation. The stuff with Todd Bowley, who's a director at this company called Vivid Seats, and they sell tickets to Chelsea games, any game, by the way. So you can get the last game of the season. They're not on sale now to people in the UK. But if you live in Florida or Tampa Bay, you can buy a seat at Stamford Bridge for $4,500, whatever, $3,000. Yeah. Todd Bowley's involved in this company. I've seen tonight, Man City have now got a deal with Viagogo. Now they do tickets and seats and stuff like that. These clubs are now going down a very dark path when it comes to ticketing.
Yeah, it's disgusting, mate. This is this again kind of ties into what we started off the pod talking about, atmospheres and so on. And it's like I said to you that people are being priced out of going to watch the club they love, and teams, especially some of these bigger teams in the top flight, are more interested in the tourist fan than the guy who lives round the corner from the stadium or a couple of miles away. There's no ifs or buts about it. What you said there, I didn't know any of that, but it doesn't surprise me in the slightest. These clubs, and it's the owners themselves, they don't, like you said, they don't try and hide it. They come in and they say that they want to, the brands, they want to expand the brands, and they want to create this, like you said, this, it's almost like an American sport mindset, isn't it? Where it's
well, it's not just exactly what it is.
Yeah, it's not just a 90-minute game of football. Like you said, you go down the concourse, get your pie and a pint, and come back. They want to create this experience, and like you said, creating an experience, that means one thing, doesn't it? That they can crank the prices up, and like you said, it's just pricing out your working class fan, and all it's doing is attracting tourists who themselves, they're only going to come and see that. It's only going to be a one-off. They're only going to come along that one time because of how much it's going to cost. But they're not bothered. They are confident that turnaround of tourists, is going to, it's going to continue. It's going to keep coming, and it's going to keep paying the way. So, yeah, I like you said, Matt, I just think it's absolutely disgusting. I can't believe at this point in time that nothing has, been done to date. Like you said, the only way something will be done is if, the governing bodies, implement something. They're the ones with the power to make change. And the longer it goes on, like you said, Man City, Chelsea, Arsenal, these kind of clubs, Tottenham as well, charging £1,200 for a season ticket. Single games are costing over £100 for a ticket. It's just crazy. I genuinely don't know how people do it, mate. Honestly,
what you just said there, Leeds United today have offered season ticket renewals £870.
And you know, there's again, there's obviously you have your cost of living, don't you, which is, you know, differentiates across the country. So down south, you know, the argument is, well, people, you know, are earning more money, that's why their prices are higher. But, you know, kind of in the Midlands and the north, you know, £800. Look, Leeds, there's a good chance Leeds.
Tom, that's the guts of 870 quid.
Yeah. There's a good chance Leeds are going to be in the Premier League next season, but that seems a hell of a lot of money for me for, you know, a club of, you know, I know Leeds are a big team, but, you know, the fact is they've been playing in the Championship for some time now. Yeah, nearly £1,000 for a blooming season ticket. That's not right in my opinion, mate. And again, I feel
is it exploitational because Leeds United are a one club city, and that club will know they've probably got a waiting list as long as my arm for somebody else to shoot that seat up.
Yeah, die hard. But this is what needs to be done, in my opinion. If these clubs are adamant that this is what they have to charge, they need to be made to explain, you know, in black and white to those fans as to why it is they are charging these prices. Because this is the other thing, you know, it might be done. I don't think it's been done. I've never seen anything, you know, a club coming out and saying, well, look, you know, we've had some moans and groans and complaints about how much we're charging for our season ticket. This is why, you know, they outline, you know, within their social channels, this is why we're having to charge this. They, you know, they don't. There don't seem to be any, you know, accountability for them charging whatever they want. Like, you know, how can, you know, like I said, how can it vary so much? That's the thing I can't understand is, you know, we're not talking, you know, a lot of the clubs in the Championship are of similar size, aren't they? Similar size stadium. Like you said, similar size populations in terms of the fans, you know, that feed into the club. How can you then have such a massive difference between some of the season tickets that are being sold? You know, we'll just use us for an example. Leeds, how can Leeds justify a £900 season ticket when our, you know, adult season ticket is just over £400? That's a double, more than double what we're offering. Well, how can they justify that massive jump in price? You know, what is the reason behind that?
Well, if you're asking me the question, I would say it comes from something that you highlighted earlier, American ownership. Obviously, they've got the 49ers in there. You know, this is just my opinion. It's not factual, but I would suggest American owners get in for one reason only. They want to make money. Obviously, they want to be successful, but they want to make money. And they'll do whatever it takes business-wise to do that. So I think that's why. You've just said there, you know, Leeds could be a Premier League club. What if they're not? What if they do miss out in the Premier League this season? You've renewed at £870 and the Albion fans are renewing at half the price. I don't know how I'd feel about that if I was a Leeds fan.
Yeah, but you just hit the nail on the head. You know, they've got a real passionate, diehard fan base who, you know, football is a massive part of their life. You know, and rightly so, you know, but that's, again, it's just disgusting in that the club almost know that. They know that they have this passionate, hardcore fan base that will ultimately do whatever it takes to be able to afford a season ticket, you know, year in, year out. You know, they'll make whatever adjustments are necessary to their life in order to get hold of that Leeds season ticket. But that in itself is just absolutely disgusting. Like you said, the only way change will happen is if, you know, the Leeds fans collectively through the fan forums, you know, the fan groups, etc., like that, you know, like you said, just stop going, you know, in their droves, you know, serious numbers. That is the only way that they would sit up and take note. But until that happens, you know, nothing will. I don't feel, you know, like you said, if you're probably right, you know, knowing Leeds, you know, how big their fan base is, how passionate they are. Like you said, they probably have a waiting list for season ticket. You know, so again, for me, mate, it needs the governing bodies to come in and say, this is getting out of control. They need to, again, I don't know how it'll be done, but again, I use the example of the continent. If Serie A and the Bundesliga and La Liga can implement some sort of, cap, some sort of level, cap to their tickets, in terms of how much teams can charge, et cetera, et cetera. Well, if they can do it, there's no reason why we can't do it over here. I don't know enough as to how they would go about that, but that's the example I use is that, well, the top leagues in the continent are doing it. They are taking it very seriously and they are making sure fans don't get priced out of football. Well, we can do it over here. There's no question, in my opinion.
Just on the flip side of Coventry, obviously they travel to Bramall Lane on Friday night. Sheffield United are using this as one of their kind of focus group games. They're calling it floodlight football. Easy for me to say. 20 quid for adults, 10 quid for kind of under 22s and students, and a fiver for kids. That sounds about right to me.
Yeah, 100%. Again, if games are on the, sometimes this is what does mad in with clubs, is because there's so much football on the telly, especially the Championship and the deal with Sky Sports, is that they get a lot more fans through the gates on midweek matches, where people will probably be a little bit more inclined to go, oh well, I've got back from work, night game, especially at the end of the year when the weather's a bit crap. Do I really want to be paying, 30, 40 pound plus, to brave the traffic and brave the weather to go and watch my team when I can watch them on the telly? But if they, they'd start doing more deals like that more frequently, kids for £1 or, cheap kids tickets, discounted tickets for students, OAPs, it'll bring more fans through the gates and fill the stadium, which is obviously what the players want. So, yeah, it seems, I'm not labelling all clubs the same. There's clubs out there who are very good. They do a lot of these deals, a lot of initiatives. They do try and look after their fans in terms of the price of tickets, etc. But there's a hell of a lot more who aren't, mate. That's for sure.
Look, I just wanted to highlight this story. And again, it's not from the Championship. It's from League 2 last weekend. Bradford obviously going for the automatic spots. They bought Colchester, were kind of travelling up to Valley Parade. I think Colchester were on a great run of form, 1-6 on the bounce, or something like that. Correct me if I'm wrong in the comments. Bradford done an initiative £5 for a ticket, and that was for an adult. And what
happened?
They broke their attendance, didn't they? Broke their attendance record for the season, for the time they've been in League 2. And obviously they got a great atmosphere. Everyone bought into it. Everyone got given a scarf maybe as well. And they've gone on and won the game 4-1. A really positive story about bringing the tickets down. I saw remarkably negative comments about this story. People saying, well, if they can't afford to come every week, they shouldn't be getting let in for a £5 and stuff like this. However, Bradford themselves the club have reacted and gone again. So that they've got Crew coming, I think, maybe this weekend. And they've not gone as low as a £5, but the kids at a £5 and adults for £10. And I hope they get a similar kind of attendance. I think it's... I was actually lucky enough to go there earlier in the season. I went to watch them play Wrexham. And it's an incredible stadium for League 2. It's again, another one-club city. So, yeah, just on that, I kind of felt that should be highlighted, that it can have a positive effect if you do bring that price down. I'm not saying it needs to be a £5 every week, but giving the fans something back goes a long way.
Yeah, 100%, mate. And, they can do things that, they reward, the faithful fans who have been paying full price, have got their season tickets, etc. You can tick both boxes. That's what the like I said, again, I'm just speaking from experience with West Brom. What they're doing now, they offer the early bird for season ticket holders to renew their season ticket for a reduced price. To show that that they are grateful for their support. By saying, well, we're going to offer you a reduced price for you to renew your seat that you've got here now, and they have a really good bit of time as well to make a decision whether they do want to renew or not. They're not pressured, they're not put on the spot. You've got a week to make your mind up, or your seats, free game kind of thing. So, like I said to you, I know there are a lot of clubs out there doing good things, and they are, trying to help the situation, the cost of living, making sure that doesn't have an impact on, like I said, you can't preach, you can't, what we were saying at the start, you can't preach like, being inclusive and trying to encourage everyone from every type of life to come and watch a game. You can't be preaching that and then be charging blooming £100 a blooming ticket, because you're completely stopping any chance of X amount of people coming to the game, because they just can't simply afford it. So yeah, look, mate, we could probably talk for about.
I'm really, really honest. I know you had trepidation about starting the podcast. I've thoroughly enjoyed the last 45 minutes. I think it's great. It evokes debate, and as you say, it's just opinion at the end of the day. Okay, well, listen, we'll park it there because we're 45 minutes deep, and we've got a couple of other things that we do want to talk about. There's football back this weekend, but we'll stick to some of that. We'll stick to this opinion stuff. It's decent. Okay, we're going to talk about the playoffs. Who's going to nail them, and then we'll speak about the weekend's games. We'll make go over there. We're here tonight, but I hope your missus isn't doing any DIY. I hope we're okay for a little bit of overtime. Right, okay. You sent me a really interesting piece. It's quite lengthy, I must say, but it's worth a look on the BBC website if you get a chance. And it just kind of goes through the kind of the runners and riders, if you will. I think they're a little bit what's that word? Favourable in terms of some of the sides. I for me, I think Norwich are out of it. I would say Watford are probably out of it. I don't fancy Blackburn much. I think Middlesbrough are going to need a real turn of events, and I think Wednesday are going to have to go on a real run. So for me, it's Bristol, Coventry, and yourselves for 2 spots. I don't know how you feel about that.
You think Borough are out of it as well? You think?
I do. Yeah. I just don't see. I think they've had that continuity, that consistency. The fans have turned as well before the international break. That might have done them good. Who knows? But yeah, I just feel like it depends maybe what Norwich do at the weekend. Actually, can they get themselves back into? But I look at Blackburn. I think they've gone. I think they're empty. I don't think Sheffield Wednesday will have enough. I'd love them to, but I just don't think they'll have enough. And I don't see Watford being able to get themselves over the line either.
Yeah, again, I've got a slightly different take to you in that I do think some of those. Well, no, I just do think some of those teams are still in the mix. It's like you said. I was looking at the fixtures. I know we're going to talk a bit later on about the fixtures, but I was looking at the fixtures this weekend, and I was thinking, well, if these 2 lose and these 2 win, so like use Norwich for an example. They're playing us, obviously. Bristol City have got Burnley away. Coventry have obviously got Sheffield United away on Friday night. If Norwich beat ourselves and Bristol City and Coventry, both drop points, both lose those matches, all of a sudden again you'd be looking at it thinking, well, Norwich are still in this. Middlesbrough have got Oxford at home again. It's not an easy game, but I think probably Middlesbrough out of those teams that we've just been talking about have probably got the easiest game of the weekend. So you'd be kind of expecting them to get 3 points, which then could just throw them straight back into the mix. I think I probably agree with you on Sheffield Wednesday, Millwall. What are they on? 51, I think. It's some swing, isn't it? To not only catch those, to overtake the likes of ourselves, Bristol and Coventry. That's going to take some doing. We've only got 8 games left of the season, but I do genuinely still believe that Middlesbrough are right in the mix still. I think they're the ones I worry about. Obviously, Coventry and Bristol are right in the mix. There's no doubt about that. I worry about those 2. But I do think Borough are very much still a threat as well. And I know what you're saying. We've had blooming, we've talked about numerous times over the course of the season so far about how, inconsistent they are. Just when they seem to have turned a corner and we're waxing lyrical about how well they're playing, etc., they then go on a bad run. But it's that they have that ability to string a bit of a run together, and be a force at any moment. And that's what I do worry about them. And I don't know whether, like you said, they picked up a little bit before the international break. I don't know whether it will help them chasing the pack than when they were in there and everyone was saying, well, they're a cert for the playoffs and maybe there's a bit more pressure applied then. You got to hold that spot. There's expectation level there. Now, I think, them chasing might suit them better, if you know what I mean, in terms of a kind of mindset.
The thing with Bury is there's players that haven't turned up maybe in the last few months and they're going to need them back on form. We saw Tommy Conway for Scotland the other night. Obviously, Finn Azaz's got all those assists. Those are the kind of key ingredients. They're going to need those players back at full tilt and just get that consistency back, because that's what they've missed. Whether he's weathered the storm or not, I'm not so sure. What about the games at the weekend then, in terms of, Coventry at Sheffield United, Bristol City at Burnley, yourselves at Norwich? There could be, all three could get something, all three could get nothing. That's one of them weekends, isn't it?
Well, yes, that's it, mate. Look, I'm obviously hoping for Sheffield United and Burnley to do us a favour, get the 3 points against Coventry and Bristol, and then for us to get something, try and at least get a point against Norwich. But I'll be honest with you, mate, as you know, we've been chatting, I'm feeling really nervous about the game at the weekend because, like you said, I feel Norwich probably are a little bit too far adrift now, but I feel like they will be going into that game at the weekend almost with a kind of, we haven't got anything to lose kind of attitude. And as we all know, they are a very dangerous team going forward. They are very suspect at the back. I think back to that Bristol City game, just before the international break, some terrible, terrible defending. So, they are, their defence is an area to be targeted, but I do worry about the attacking talent that they've got. Josh Sargent has come back. He's absolutely flying at this moment in time. So, yeah, and like I said to you, I think that the teams behind us three, the Middlesbrough fans, the Blackburn fans, Sheffield Wednesday fans will be looking at the fixtures this weekend going, oh, well, all three of those teams, Coventry, Bristol and West Brom, have got really tricky games away from home. They could all drop points here. This is a chance. This is a real chance for us to just to keep, cling on in there, stay in the mix. So, again, it is like I'm as you can probably tell, mate, there's still 8 games to go, but I am starting to get really nervous. I was reading some article the other day and it was like they've applied some sort of algorithm or something in terms of, the difficulty of the teams remaining, their run-ins. And I think we're second only behind Bristol in terms of that difficulty factor. And funnily, it goes Bristol, West Brom, Coventry. Those were the 3 with the most difficult run-ins. So again, that gives a little bit of hope, a little bit of optimism to those teams that are, maybe getting written off now. Likes of Middlesbrough, the likes of Sheffield Wednesday. I think Sheffield Wednesday, in fact, had the easiest run-in from those, from that bunch of teams. So, yeah, I think maybe, it's interesting you saying what you said, and because I think obviously supporting a team that's smack bang in the middle of that obviously has an impact, and it's I'd like to be thinking the same as you, that some of these teams are already done and they're not in contention. But yeah, I'm not quite there yet, mate. I'm pretty much still thinking that all of them have still got a chance of getting in the playoff.
I just on Blackburn, I kind of felt in the week, Alan Sheehan was given the job until the end of the season at Swansea. And I thought, I wonder if the Blackburn board are thinking maybe we should have just kept Dave Lowe until the end of the season and got it over the line, because it doesn't seem to be working with Ishmael at all. And and I think the fans have checked out quite early on that one. That's what makes me think that they won't do anything. Just reading there, Norwich, they've dropped 30 points from winning positions this season, and they've only won one of their past 8 league games. But yet still you've got that trepidation because they do seem to score goals at home, don't they?
Yeah, we obviously in our last game we drew with Hull at home, and it was really, really disappointing. That was because we'd had a couple of really top draw points against Leeds and Burnley away. And if we'd followed that up with the 3 points against Hull, we'd obviously be sitting 2 points better off. But I think it would have filled the fan base with a bit more confidence as well that we've got that kind of mindset right now. We're kind of grinding out good points, getting something from the better teams in the division, and then we're going and putting the teams that are down towards the bottom to the sword and getting 3 points where we're expected to get 3 points. But it's almost kind of 1 step forward, 2 steps back a little bit after that draw against Hull, because the West Brom fans are now going, it wasn't the best performance. It was a bit nervy. There wasn't much quality. Hull could have won it at the end. They had a couple of chances to steal all the points themselves. So, it's kind of filled the fan base with nerves again going into that game against Norwich. So,
I think an after break will stand all of these guys in good stead because they'll have had time to kind of sit back and think, right, we go back in and we just give it one last push. So I think everyone will come out guns firing this weekend. I think we're in for a decent weekend. Just on that article you sent me, I've kind of scrolled to the bottom of it. There was a poll to see who punters and fans think will make the last 2 spots. So no shock to see Blackburn, Watford, Millwall, Norwich all with kind of 5% or under. Sheffield Wednesday with 7%. Then you've got Middlesbrough with 19%, Bristol City with 24%, Coventry 69%, and West Brom with 46%. So most of the people on this forum think that it'll be Coventry and West Brom.
Yeah. Again, I wish I had that confidence. Mate, I don't know what it is.
It's great watching you on here week on week because these games kind of tick off.
I know, mate. Look, this is what I'm saying to you now. This is what I'm like now with 8 games to go. I don't know. I remember last season, mate, because, it was the last game of the season where we confirmed our playoff spot and we had to beat, I'm trying to think who we had at home. I think it was Preston at home on the last game of the season. And it was in our hands, but we had to get the win. A win at 100% confirmed we were getting a playoff spot. And I was a mess, absolute mess. Because we still obviously needed to get the 3 points. And so I'm not, as much as I am looking forward to the final running, mate. It's not going to do my heart any good. I guarantee that now. So
I wasn't going to ask you this on camera, but I am now. Because it's something that I saw before I came on here. Obviously, we done a post earlier on a couple of days ago, yesterday maybe, about Josh Madge's post on Instagram, and he'll be back. And I heard Tony Mowbray saying that he'll only be back if you make the playoffs. What do you make of that?
Is that what he said? Has he?
Yeah, he said that tonight. He will only play if you make the playoffs. Is that? Do you think he needs games in his legs before those important games come? Or
it's one of those, mate. Again, he's unfortunately for us, he's had quite a few injury problems since he joined the club. He was out for the vast majority of last season, and we were hoping he put that behind him. But he's obviously had this 7 or 8 weeks out, whatever it's been. I think they're obviously going to have to play it safe. We have got options. DK's come back to fitness now. We've obviously got Lancashire on loan and Armstrong on loan. So, I think he's obviously saying we've got to play it smart. There's no point rushing him back because we have got options. We're not absolutely desperate for him to come back, so to speak. But the fans will be hearing that, bitterly disappointed because I think, the type of player that he is, it is something that we've been missing of late. It's almost like the final piece of the jigsaw, really. Someone
to dovetail with John Armstrong, even, wouldn't it?
Yeah, that's it. It's someone for to complement Armstrong, really, and I think he would do that. I think he'd do that really well. So, but again, these guys, you know, they're human beings at the end of the day. You can't risk it, can you? You don't want him doing something more serious and being out for even longer. So, yeah, it's disappointing to hear that, but then, yeah, hopefully, the rest of the team can maybe use that as a bit of kind of, what's the word? Positivity, a bit of momentum to try and get there for him, because he's had up until his injury, he had an absolutely he was doing fantastically well for us, like you pointed out in your little video on TikTok, saying he's still up there. He had that good a start, first half to the season, that he's still up there with the top scorers of the division. I'm quietly confident that if he would have stayed fit, that there's a good chance he'd be sitting at the top of it at this moment in time. So, but yeah, look, we have got the players to fill in for him and still be a threat up front. Again, just tying into what I'm saying, I just still think Tony Mowbray hasn't quite got the combinations right. I still don't think he's worked out that kind of final formula where I feel that teams like Coventry and Bristol, who are obviously on great runs of form, they have very much got a settled starting 11. You know what their team is going to be week in, week out, but it still doesn't matter. They're full of confidence. They're playing really well, gelling well with one another. I don't feel we're quite at the Coventry and Bristol level at this moment in time, which is why I think I'm starting to a little bit worried.
Okay, well, let's quickly just do a couple of these weekend games. Let's start with Friday night. You said you were looking for Chris Wilder to do you a favour. He's been talking today.
Big fan of Chris Wilder, mate. Big fan of Chris Wilder.
He's been talking today about how he thinks Frank Lampard should be future England manager. So he's done great work at Derby, great work at Coventry. Can Coventry go there and spring a surprise, or do you think?
Yeah, 100%. 100%. If Coventry, if they turn up and they play to the best of their ability, then they will pose Sheffield United, problems. Again, it's gonna be all about how Sheffield United. Again, if Sheffield United play to the very best of their ability, absolutely on the money, then they can beat absolutely anyone. But we've seen, there's been times this season at Bramall Lane, the game against Hull springs to mind, where they weren't at it, made a few changes, and they were punished. So, but like I said, if both teams are at it, first and foremost, it should be. I've got a feeling it's going to be a cracking game on Friday, because to be fair to Frank Lampard, he does go for it, doesn't he? There's been times this season where Wilder has obviously played. He's been a bit more kind of defence minded and solid, and they've ground out results, where Lampard does very much seem to be like, we're going to try and win every game. We're going to try and score goals.
Minute as well, they go and go.
Yeah, that's it. That's their mindset, which it's fantastic to be honest with you. And like you said, a lot of praise needs to go to Lampard for how they're approaching games and the way they're playing. So yeah, I think that should be a cracking game. But like I said, I'm just hoping Sheffield United turn up. They're at their best. They can do us a favour and they can get the 3 points, because obviously there's a hell of a lot for them to play for. Leeds dropping points of late. They've got the chance of going top of the table, haven't they? Before Leeds play later on, over the weekend.
Leeds kind of mentality has been questioned over the last few days, last few weeks. Are they falling apart again? All that nonsense. If United get the 3 points on Friday night and go top of the tree, it does put pressure on, Leeds at Elland Road. I know it's Swansea, but still, it could be a banana skin.
Not for me. I think they've got a good game in Swansea at home. I know Swansea have picked up a little bit of late. And like you said, the news of, what's his name? I keep forgetting his name.
Alan Sheehan.
It's obviously been confirmed. He's gonna lead the team to the end of the season, and they'll reassess things, which I'm sure the players will be happy with that. A bit of stability at very least, until the end of the season. But yeah, I just think it's a good game for Leeds. I'll be absolutely astonished if they don't get the 3 points against Swansea at the weekend.
A big one down at the bottom. Hull v Luton. Were you impressed with Hull? When you saw them at the Hawthorns.
I was. Again, it's easy to criticise, West Brom for not playing well enough, and we're the ones that dropped the points, etc. But I think that probably is doing a bit of disservice to Hull. I felt, they had a game plan, and I thought they executed it well. They frustrated us. They defended very well, but then they did pose a threat on the counter attack. That Kamara's when he's up for it, he can be a real tricky customer. He's a threat for him going forward. As you know, I like Joe Geldhart for him. I think he's a really good player at this level. So I thought they executed their game plan really well. But I think in this game, there'll be an expectation from the fans at home against Luton, who are obviously down there, for them to take the game to Luton. They obviously sat back and looked to frustrate us, and were happy for us to have the ball and have the majority of possession. Whereas I think it'll be different in this game. Their fans will want to see them go for it and try and get an early goal and try and secure the 3 points comfortably. But again, I'm hopefully going to try and watch that game, because I think it's almost getting last chance saloon for Luton, isn't it? They got that win when we had the lad from Luton on and we were chatting. But then they've dropped. They haven't picked up any points since then, I don't think, have they? And Derby have obviously had a bit of a flurry. 3 wins on the bounce, so pressure's well and truly back on Bloomfield again, isn't it? And they're running out of games. So that's.
I went at the weekend though with Derby not playing. Would kind of get them back into it, wouldn't it? Just last word. You sent me something before we came on here. Obviously, Maxey, the big Ukrainian centre half of Plymouth, he's out for the rest of the season. They're away at Watford, I think, at the weekend.
Yeah.
You see that as the beginning of the end for them, don't you?
I think so, mate. I think him and the other lad they signed. I always forget the other lad who you brought. Yeah, those two were the catalysts, weren't they, of that little bit of resurgence? And it stemmed from them, doing a lot of work defensively and making it difficult for teams to get past them and score. But they still, Matic, he still hasn't been able to deal with the issue at the other end of the pitch, scoring goals. They're still struggling to score goals. So, with him being injured now until the end of the season is going to be a huge loss in defence. I won't be surprised to see him, start shipping more goals and being a bit more suspect at the back. Yeah, it's like I said to you, I think it's almost like the final nail in the coffin that, him being injured, because he was a key player for them, wasn't he? And if they were going to stay up, it was, it was going to be, a lot of it was going to be down to the hard work he's put in since he's come into the club. So again, like Watford, the teams we're talking about, the playoff, they're in that bunch still who are still clinging on to hopes of sneaking a spot. Again, I'll be astonished if they don't get all 3 points against Plymouth on home, in that early kickoff.
Okie dokie, we'll leave it there. Enjoyed that, mate. Brilliant, really good. Listen, if you've that's all people dipping in and out throughout. So if you have, as I say, as always, like, comment, join us on all socials. We do like to talk about the Championship. It's a passion. I'm going to say it's become a passion. We'll be back on Monday night, obviously, to look through all the weekend's games. There's plenty of it. Delighted it's back. It's feel like it's been away for ages. But if you are into a game, enjoy yourselves, and we'll see you back on Monday night. Cheers.